All right, happy Tuesday. We're ahead of schedule because we're going to 3 ABN tomorrow, so we're getting this out before Thursday. So hope you all are doing well. How are you, Pastor Henry?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I'm trying to thank South Carolina for adjusting the weather so that I'm ready for Illinois to freeze my patootie off.
This is true. You all might be asking, why am I in a baseball jersey? Key nugget. 28 days until pitchers and catchers report. So if you don't like playoff football, there's good things ahead for you.
It's March Madness in the middle of there too.
It is. There's a few things, but that's not why we're here.
Oh, good.
That's not why we're here. We're here to talk about this upcoming Sabbath.
Oh, that's right. This Saturday at 11 at the 7th Collective, we are continuing our Matthew teaching series with the third and fourth parables that Jesus is telling in Matthew 13. So we've had the parable of the soil. We had this last Saturday, we were talking about the parable of the tares or the weeds. And now we get to talk about a mustard seed and leaven. Really short, but really profound as we build on this parable teaching. So if you're like, I don't get it, what is that about? And I missed all the other stuff, it's all online. It's also on our podcasting network. But this Saturday, we will be dealing with not one, but two. So what we covered in 2 weeks, I'm doing in 1 week. Two more, double, all in 1 week. But that's happening this week. The parable of the mustard seed. Not the one you're probably thinking. He says two parables about mustard seeds. This is the first. The mustard seed and the leaven, which he also uses as a second parable somewhere else. But 3 and 4, shut the door. We'll open it for you, though, if you come at 11 o'clock at 7th Collective that Saturday. So that's coming up this week, but as is very fun, happening more and more, we still have outstanding question or questions from the teaching this last week. So
That's right.
We want to answer those.
That's right. One question.
Oh, only one. Okay.
One.
Oh, good.
And so, speaking of, it seems the last couple of weeks our theme has been somewhat around soil.
Agrarian society, which is what Israel was at the time.
And some may think gardening. Maybe you like that. Maybe you have a green thumb. Maybe you don't. So, here's the question. Is there a particular fertilizer you recommend?
Oh, yes. Well, Miracle Grow it. No, I'm just kidding. That's not the question, is it?
That's not. No.
Okay.
But speaking
We are
of,
not endorsed by Miracle Grow,
Yeah.
but if they'd like to help with our building campaign, you can.
Speaking of gardening, there is a garden theme to this. So here we go. And I'll use my quotations when it gets there. Is there a pre-emergent? Okay, pre-emergent, something you apply to help prevent something, hopefully. Pre-emergent. That the 7th Collective can ask God for to keep weeds from growing among us.
Ooh. Okay. Is there a pre-emergent, using that as an illustration, that the 7th Collective can apply to prevent weeds growing among us? Well, first of all, it would probably be good, since I am not like the greenest of thumbs. I'm wearing a green shirt, but I'm not a green thumb. Why don't we just actually look up the term and get an official definition for pre-emergent? Because if we're going to use that as an illustration, we probably, just like with parables, we should know the context around that. So if we're not
Yes.
gardeners, let's get up on that. So here is what, and I knew it was about pre-emergent, so I do have this already looked up here. All right, here's what the definition of a pre-emergent is. Okay. Pre-emergent is a type of herbicide, that's a big word, that creates a chemical barrier in the soil to stop weed seeds from germinating and establishing roots. It gives us 3 breakdowns to this definition. Number 1, barrier formation. Okay. Pre-emergent, when applied to the soil surface, it forms a thin, invisible layer. When the weed seed sprouts, interesting, it goes ahead and sprouts, come back to that. The first tiny root hits the barrier, which stops cell division, preventing the root from growing and the seedling from emerging. And the final aspect of this is it tackles weeds at the earliest life stage, stopping them before they become a problem, unlike post-emergent herbicides that kill existing weeds. Okay. So that's our definition. It is applied to the soil surface, kind of surface level, and it forms a thin, invisible layer. It is supposed to not stop the weed from sprouting, but it's supposed to stop its roots from being able to divide and multiply so that it can really grow. So you're kind of like trying to choke it out at its earliest life stage. And then finally, well, I just said that it's the earliest life stage that it's targeting. So if I had to define pre-emergent, it's a barrier at the surface level. It is something that doesn't stop the thing from germinating, but it stops it from multiplying or dividing or getting stronger. And you do it at the earliest life stage.
You know one I like a lot in there, Pastor Henry?
What?
Barrier. Because this is what makes me think. A barrier is only as good as its strength or its even application. Simply put, right? If you get a barrier that has a lot of holes in it, weeds will just healthily grow through it. So we, as a church, I then apply it, also have to be unified in our application. Because as it states, it's not going to stop a weed from sprouting, but the strength of how we are together would prevent weeds from growing. Just something that grasps me
So
a little.
in other words, pre-emergent really is only as effective as how widespread it is.
Correct.
Right. So in this question, even though an individual asked it, I guess you could say the church as a whole would have to follow these principles, or else you're going to have huge gaps in the system. Which, speaking of churches as a whole, is interesting that we use the term barrier, because what that makes me immediately think about is our core values.
You remember those, don't you?
All right. Number one. No, I won't ask that right now. The second, shame on you, though, because some of you were starting to go, oh, remember. They're online if you forget.
That's correct.
Okay. They're on our website. But at the same time, it reminded me of that because one of our core values, I'll give you one for free, is we build bridges, not barriers. So that term barrier is even in it. So when you were talking about barrier application, I was like, wait a minute, as a church, we don't want barriers. Well, I mean, you have to see the definition of that. There,
Correct.
we're talking about barriers against certain things, but we aren't talking about weeds in the core value. But in a sense, even though there's multiple ways in an illustration this can do, but using this illustration, our core values are a kind of pre-emergent. Because as a whole, what it's supposed to be communicating to people that be interested about our community or join our community or whatever, we are setting a standard of behavior. We are setting an expectation of, hey, this is what this community is about. This is what this community wants to do. And if you're not really interested in that, if that's not really your thing, while we are open to everyone, we may not be for everyone, if that makes any sense. I mean, for example, I mean, and a lot of churches don't have these, and I think this is why they struggle. You're not going to notice with the pre-emergent in that definition, it doesn't stop weeds. It's just supposed to stop their multiplication or hopefully slow it down.
Right.
Right. There is nothing a church can do. Let me just get out ahead and see here. And the parable, I think, that inspired this question says that too. The weeds are still there. There's no way, and I don't think it's healthy for a church to go on some sort of rant about let me de-weed myself and like go on some sort of like witch hunt or inquest or whatever. Let me figure out who's the weed and rip it out. Because again, remember, the weeds are not only there in the parable, they stay till the end of time. Now, that's not an excuse to ignore weeds, but at the same time, I mean, there's things we can do, but weeds are inevitable. The thing with the pre-emergent is you're trying to keep them from multiplying, right? So there are people that come to churches, not picking on anyone in particular, but there are people that come to churches, right? If you have core values and they're coming to a church and they're like, I want to do X. And then you tell them, hey, our community prioritizes this and we don't really support this. It's not that there won't be people that maybe wanted, we're human beings. We put against the rules. We do. It's not that there may not be people with ill intent that show up, but it does create a barrier that hopefully either disincentivizes certain people. Right? They go, well, why would I even try then if that's what the majority of that church is doing? And that's not really, I mean, for example, let's just make this really practical. I use that one, we build bridges, not barriers. If you're someone, and not picking on their sincerity or anything, but I do know in the West, we have a lot of Christians that their particular theology is, and we talked about this some in our core value series, barriers are what protect us. Okay, or the world is the evil, dangerous, scary thing, and I need to keep it out. Right? I mean, whatever they mean by that. Again, we have a teaching on this. And then they go to a community that says we're going to be very intentional in removing those. Not all, right? I mean, again, it depends on your definitions, but there is something in our community that there is a certain level of barrier resistance. Okay. Then that individual, for good or for bad, might be able to then make a fair assessment and go, that's not really what I'm in. That might not be the community for me. Now, I'm not necessarily saying they're a weed, but if someone was a weed and that became a particular issue for them, it might prevent them from coming. Or if the weed shows up, because you can't stop weeds all the way out, the parables say that pre-emergent doesn't stop them. You can hopefully prevent it from multiplying. Right. I think this is much more practical for a church. Let's say there's someone, for example, well, let's just give a really obvious one across churches. Gossip, right? If there's someone who loves to gossip and they come to a church and everyone says they don't like gossip, but there's nothing written in, there's nothing intentional that the whole community is trying to apply, it's not evenly applied, then they're going to find the next person to share the gossip, and then they're going to share it, and then they're going to share it, and then it's going to start multiplying and then choke everything out. Right, but if you're a community that set a standard and as a whole, even application, the vast majority of the church is like, we don't accept this behavior, we don't want to do that, we want to be hyper aware of what the definition of that is and try and, no pun intended, weed it out, you have a higher chance of stopping the multiplication of it, right? That person still may try to engage in it, but if 90 out of 100 people in the church are like, we don't want to do that, and we've made efforts to study its definition and be self-aware of us even trying to engage in it, then it's going to be harder for that person that shows up at the church and joins it and then wants to gossip to be able to find more willing roots, right, to really set into the culture of the church. So I don't know, that might be a very wonky way of saying it, but our core values are a form of pre-emergent. That's one reason our church is already doing it, both because it's a pre-emergent and it's a fertilizer, but that's now I'm mixing all of our metaphors, but for the sake of today, core values can be a form of pre-emergent. That's why one thing I would like to see further down the road, just getting in Pastor Henry's head, is as we continue to grow, as we move downtown, I would love to see people interested in joining our church, coming to our church, where instead of just stopping the whole church and doing core value series, even though that's important, we'll probably redo that again, is from the get-go be open with people and go, this is our values. If you're interested in this church, this is what we're pushing, this is what we're trying to grow, this is what we're seeding our field as a church with. And so people can be aware, maybe this is for me, maybe this isn't. A kind of form of pre-emergent. It's not going to stop everyone. Some people are determined, but hopefully it will stop the spread. It doesn't stop their showing up or their germinating, but hopefully stops the spread. So I would say core values on a corporate level are something the church is already doing and we're trying to do. This is why we want you not to just dump it now that we're past that series. Like if you've already forgotten them, whoever you are that's listening, we love you, but maybe this is a great chance for you to go look at them again, because we don't want those to just be out and then disappear. Okay, we're very intentional. That's a pre-emergent. But that brings us to a second thing. It's not just corporate application, it's individual application.
Right.
Right. And if we're going to use the parables as an example, remember our two parables so far. This would be a good way to review. In reverse order, our parable last week was there is more than just one thing being sown into the field. Weeds and wheat in Jesus' illustration, right? There's a good narrative and a bad narrative. There's the narrative of the kingdom of the heavens, and there's the narrative of evil. That was the point of the parable this time. There is more than one narrative being thrown into the field, and only time and fruit is going to tell you which one is taking root, which one is being fed. Right? So again, on a personal level, a pre-emergent, in a sense, is the word of God. It is parables like this, right? It is letting God convict us and do some self-reflection on our own yard, our own soil, right? And so like we said last week, you need to ask yourself the fruit in your life, what you've seen over time in your life, what narrative are you feeding? It's inevitable you will have weeds in your life, and hopefully it's inevitable you'll have some wheat in your life. But the question is, which one are you feeding? Which one are you putting fertilizer on? Which one did you even put pre-emergent down? Do you even care if there's weeds there? Maybe you think the weed is the thing that needs to stay alive and you're trying to kill your grass. Let's be honest. Some weeds initially look pretty.
Right.
Right? I've had that problem in my own yard. I'm not a green thumb, right? But there's to a certain extent, dandelions are pretty until they turn that white ball that then blows all over your yard, right? But when they're yellow, they're pretty, right? So again, are you mistaking weeds in your life for flowers? Right? Do you think they look pretty now? We've all had this problem with sin and selfishness, right? At first in your life, it kind of look pretty. It smells nice. I'm getting a nice reaction. And then it turns into the dandelion blow thing, and then it spreads out and it's carnage like a nuclear blast in my life, right? So again, a pre-emergent in your own life is asking yourself, what narrative am I feeding? Right? I mean, I'll just pick on us. I talked about core values. Another thing as a church we've been trying to push, and I think we both can sit here, Pastor Michael, and be honest about it. We've struggled with, I don't know if this is just maybe because we, the particular people we're drawing or whatnot, groups have really struggled. And there's a lot we could say about that. I don't want to divert the question, but I'll say this. Groups at their core are not just supposed to be another activity to keep you busy. Okay, and maybe some people, maybe we're struggling with that. We're not communicating that well. Maybe that's on us. People think, oh, it's another thing they want us to do, another church thing during the week. No, the idea behind it was groups, when done right, are a feeder or a pre-emergent system for spirituality. Right? Because again, we said we have to do this collectively, or there's patches in the field we can grow, right? There's this, not to mix too many issues, but there's this big problem, I think, in Western Christianity today where Christianity is an Eastern religion that we've westernized, and part of our westernization is we've made it an individual thing. Christianity as a whole is really just about me and my personal relationship with Jesus. And yes, Jesus wants a personal relationship with you, but you're not an island. Christianity was not just about you as the individual. And kind of in corporate America, Western societies like consumerism, I can have everything I need on my phone. I can read the Bible on my phone. I can watch sermons on my phone. I can watch sermons and teachings online at home. I don't need the church. What good is the church? Because it's messed up people and I find people annoying. Like, I just need me. Well, yes, there's a certain element where, yes, you have to work on your own soil. But like we just said, certain principles of Christianity only work when the whole community is doing it. And if you don't have a community, and if you have a community that isn't supportive of some of these things, you will, even if you do your own soil well, if your own little patch of the land is being pre-emerged and fertilized and whatever, but everybody else around you is not, you ever notice your community influences you? Not even church communities, like your work environment influences you, your friends influence you. I mean, that's just human nature. You don't have to be religious to believe that. You are a product of your environment as well. Yes, you have individual things you work on, but there's also a corporate side. You can't ignore that. And I'm too worried that Christians, we're not willing to invest for a lot of different reasons that are beyond the scope of this question, but we're not willing to invest in collectively trying to do certain things in the field, and we pay for it. Right. And so here's the thing. If you realize in your life, I might be feeding the weed narrative. All right. But then you are not intentionally investing beyond yourself. You just keep it at your level. I'm doing my thing. I should be fine. But you're not around people that also want to feed a different narrative. And you're not around people that can hold you accountable to that. Because no matter how good you are individually, eventually you wear out. And there's times where we go through cycles and you might need someone else to help carry the weight. Whatever. If you don't have that, right, you die. And I'm worried that because as a community, we just think church is it. And by church, we don't think of community, we think of service. It's another bad Western thing. We think church is just the thing I do at 11 a.m. on a Sunday or a Saturday, right? That's not sustainable. That just doesn't work. Because the majority of your life, you're feeding the weed narrative. Using the parable, we're in a world that is predominated. Now I'm getting a little ahead to this week coming up, the parable of the mustard seed. We'll get into that. But the field is naturally weeds, not naturally wheat. That's a spoiler. You just got a bonus for this week. We'll get into that. But so we've got to work collectively. But again, that starts with individual choice. So here's a good way to end it. Back to the first parable, which we hadn't gotten to. Remember, the reaction to the kingdom message is all dependent on the soil it lands in. And you do ultimately, this is where the individual does matter. The individual makes the choice. The individual can't do it by themselves, but the individual can make the choice. So if I had to do this, individuals make choices. What you prioritize is what happens. Right? I mean, we're kind of in this quiet quitting culture and all that where we like to make excuses for everything else. I'm just going to, sorry to be the unpopular one here. Christianity pulls the wool on that. You can blame everybody else you want. I'm not saying other people don't make decisions, but at the end of the day, your choice matters. It's Romans 6. Paul says, choices have consequences. Not that God hates you, and I'm not trying to shame you. I'm not saying, yes, other people do make choices that impact us. But at the end of the day, you make choices. What you prioritize is what you're going to get out of life. Right? I really, and I feel for people. I'm not trying to shame you, but I feel really sad when I meet Christians. They're like, well, just life isn't, spirituality just isn't turning out the way I want. And then they start blaming the pastors and they blame the church and they blame the quality of the music or the sermons or the way. And none of those aren't things that matter and we can work on. But at the end of the day, it's everybody else's problem but theirs. Ah, that person threw the weeds in there. Ah, that person did the whatever. Yeah, okay, but here's the one power humans have that no one can take from you: choice. And even if you want somebody else to choose for you, that's a choice you made. All right? You have to hand that choice off to somebody else. All right? I find it interesting. We're in the West where everything's about personal choice, and we just love to make excuses about not choosing.
Right.
You know, everybody else's choice. Ah, there's too many choices, so I just won't choose. Well, that's still the choice. So, again, what's a pre-emergent? Decide what choice you're making in your soil. All right? And then 2, right, with those choices, what are you feeding? Both individually and collectively. And if you're not working on both of those parts, the weeds are just going to go wild. And they do. Right? So there's more to that. But I would say, I guess the final thing I'd say, actually, that reminded me, this is a good place to end. There was one last thing this definition said I want to come back to because we didn't read it. It had a key consideration part at the bottom here. And this is what it said as a key consideration. Timing is crucial. And it, in a gardening metaphor, said, well, you want to apply in early spring for summer weeds like crabgrass and early fall for winter weeds, ideally when the soil temperature is consistently hit in the mid-50s. In other words, when the soil is ready for anything to happen to it. I would say this if you're watching this video right now. Timing is crucial. If you're even open to thinking about this, if you're feeling some sort of way inside, you're having some reaction to this, then I would say your soil has hit that 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Your soil is primed for something to happen to it, which means now timing matters. The choice you make now matters. This is one of the reasons in the Bible, I'm going on another rant, but you'll see verses where people like Joshua are saying, choose this day whom you will serve. And it's not supposed to be a fear tactic. I know Christians are really good at that. Choose now because you might die tomorrow, and choose now because the Lord's coming soon. Like, I'm not talking about fear-based decision making. I'm talking about the incentive in the Bible was not, oh my goodness, like if I don't, something's going to hit me. The urgency in the Bible was the you of today can recognize the need to make a choice, but the you of tomorrow may not recognize the same opportunity you today does, because we're changing. We're not status beings. We're not beings that exist in status. That might be the better way to phrase my wording, right? We are a product of our environment and the choices we make and the experiences we have. And the you of now can make a choice that the you of tomorrow may not, and the you of yesterday couldn't. If you realize you have a desire that I want to feed a different narrative and I want things to be different, you can make the choice now. And I would encourage you, now is the best time to make it, because you don't know what tomorrow brings. And I don't mean that in a fear-based way. I just mean that in a practical way. I'm not saying you're out of choices if you don't, but none of us are the prophet or the son of one. We don't know the future. None of us are Nostradamus. He didn't really know the future either. Spoiler alert, but choices matter, and a good pre-emergent is applying it now. If you're like, I'm just going to wait for the whole of this parable series and then I'll make a choice. Well, that's a choice. You just made one. But is your soil going to is your spirituality going to be like South Carolina? Was it 76 on Christmas and now it's like 30 in the beginning of January, right? Your soil might get cold tomorrow. Not saying it will never warm up again, but why do you want to make your life subject to the whims of things you can't control? Control what you can control. Pre-emergent is something that has to be intentionally put down. It doesn't randomly get filtered through the air or blown out by trees and wind. Like, pre-emergent is something somebody had to mix and somebody had to apply. All right. So I guess what pre-emergent, to wrap this all up, could Seventh Collective do? Well, corporately, core values. Corporately, I'd say groups, having community. Maybe not just groups, but community as a whole. What are you investing in? And then individually, decision making. All right. And there's other tools, Bible study, prayer, groups, things we could talk about, but just staying simple in this illustration. I probably made it too complex anyway. Choice. All right. On an individual level, choose to apply the pre-emergent in your life. And that pre-emergent is thinking, analyzing, asking the Lord, be self-aware, self-assessing, and then making a choice about it. All right. And then don't do it by yourself. So again, to our parables so far, how the kingdom message responds is the soil it lands in. You get to choose what soil it is. And then 2, remember there's multiple narratives out there being fed into your soil, whether you want it or not. And time and fruit tells you which one's taking root. So if you don't like what's growing in your field, make a choice. They all kind of interlink.
Got it.
God will give us some bonus material, but that's this Saturday. And I've gone in circles enough. So you can tell I've had to go around my yard multiple times to put this pre-emergent out. I'm done now.
All right. Got it. Well, if you just felt like you got smacked upside the head with a Rafiki stick, it's because Mufasa and Simba are right above us.
It's okay.
So,
it's in the past.
That's right. Hope you all have a great week. Hope we return safely on Friday, and we will see you Sabbath.